everyone, and welcome to China EVs and More, where my co-host Lei Xing and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors. If you enjoy this room, please help us get the word out to other enthusiasts. And of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Lei, and I'm the Managing Director at Sino Auto Insights, a management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Hey Lei, good evening. Can you please introduce yourself?
Good morning to a hung up to. This is your co-host Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review, and this is episode number 76. Well, there's really two topics today, but obviously there's a lot more. These dismissed, we'll talk about that. And Tu and Mark goes on this EV fact-finding, test driving trip in Beijing. So which one do you want to start?
Yeah, so let's just talk Diess. I've kind of beaten a dead horse, with my newsletter. So I'd love your take because, like you said, I'm trying not to dunk on them too much.
Yeah, well, we've already dunked on Volkswagen countless times on the show.
Yes.
So
yes.
It's doesn't matter. We dunk it one more time, right? But no, I think we agree that the way to describe it was shocking, but not surprising.
Right.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Shocking in the sense there were nothing, in terms of kind of forewarning, right, that this was going to happen. And especially after he had sent out that Happy Holidays LinkedIn message, and later on it turned out to be a goodbye message instead. And I think when he sent that out, he already knew that he was gone, right? Because based on all the reports that we've seen, this was a week in the making.
Yep.
Actually, this decision, right? It wasn't. It was abrupt to us, but inside it was, in the making for actually, it's been in the making for months and years, right? Mm-hmm. Given that what these had to face, and you had mentioned in your newsletter the three clans, right? The Porsche and Peace family, the Works Council, and the Lower Saxony state, right? And the reporting is based on that 20 board member all unanimously agreeing to sack him, right? So that's the shocking part, but not surprising because we've seen the news, we've seen what's been discussed, either rumors, and then these kind of dodged it, right, several times, but then this happened. So I think my take on not so much of a dunking, but rather I think these was scapegoated a little bit. But on the other hand, I think his time was over because his role, I believe, was to turn around this ship, not make it go faster. And he did his job, but he has to go because he is an outsider, okay, coming in from BMW. So he brought something new. He kind of changed the mentality. I think his top priority was, get that Dieselgate image, eliminate that image from Volkswagen when he came on. And he did it. It was all about EVs, right? MEB, and then all the strategies, new auto, all these things that he did. Strategically, I think it was the right move, but execution-wise, I think you also mentioned this. There were some flaws, there were some hiccups that kind of finally led to him being sacked. So shocking, but not surprising. That's my take. But I think credit needs to be due where it is, right? So, it's unfortunate, but life moves on, because if any company, any auto company with this boardroom drama, it's Volkswagen. There's no other auto company in the world with the supervisory board, with the works council, with the Lower Saxony, right? There's no other company in the world that has more boardroom drama than Volkswagen. And by the way, over the last few years, I've counted, the supervisory board always meets on Fridays, and tons of decisions were made on Fridays and announced on Fridays. So, yeah, so that's my rough take.
So, in addition to what I'd kind of written in the newsletter, I'm actually pretty concerned for Volkswagen Group, because if everybody is in agreement that he needed to go, I'm not sure they're ready for major changes. And so you had talked about all these changes had already happened. I agree with that 100%. And I'd gotten a little pushback from a tweet I had that said that I think it implied that I wasn't giving Diess credit. And let me say, he should get credit, but he is also, he's being scapegoated. But at the end of the day, he wasn't able to make these huge changes, right? And as a CEO, you don't really have the benefit of excuses. You just got to get it done. And he didn't get it done, right? The most important thing for me with Volkswagen Group and with all of these legacies is they just need to move faster, right? They're going to make mistakes. We get that. But if their decision making is very slow and methodical, like in the past, this is where they're going to lose. They're not going to be able to keep up with the Tesla and the China EV Inc. So does Oliver Blume have the right environment to be successful? I don't know anything about this guy, but Porsche, I believe, sells less than 400,000 vehicles annually globally. So to go from managing 400,000 vehicles at the premium segment, and then pushing out to 8 million cars or 7 million cars a year across 9 different brands, that's a completely different monster, right?
Yeah, not only that, and also because there's a bit of a conflict of interest, because you run the group and you run one of the most profitable automotive brands, right? Their latest numbers, almost 20% ROI. That's unheard of.
I love Porsche, by the way. I think
same here.
Their products are amazing. So
and so one of the articles I've seen, I think it was FT or some other, was exactly on this concern from investors, having a group CEO that's also running one of its brands, right? I think that was a concern that could affect the valuation of the IPO, and also chatter on his position on the e-fuels, and rumor that, right, he
was almost colluding,
somehow, right, lobbied, with the government, but that's not confirmed. But still, the trajectory that Porsche has is that, I mean, this has been announced many times, 80% EVs by what, 2030? 2030, yep. Right? So I think strategically for Volkswagen Group, the namesake brand, all the brands, that the EVs, there's no going back, right? There's no turning back. And it's about execution, and it's about not only about the EVs, but really about the software, because
that's it.
EVs nowadays are all about software. That was part of the reason that even the lady from the Works Council believed that it was slow, right? Affecting the Audi and Porsche model rollout, right? The Macan and some others. But I think there's a multitude of things: culture, software, execution, being too maverick. I think these, next to Elon Musk, is one of the most outspoken,
polarizing.
And social media wise, right? Who posts stuff on Twitter and LinkedIn that sometimes pokes fun and being a frenemy or friend of Elon Musk, right? Who does that? There's no other global CEO that does that.
But he gets
So
it.
that
But that's because he gets it. Because social media needs to be part of every CEO, major CEO's kind of toolbox, right?
To the three clans we mentioned that's probably a bit too much. Right? So all of these things I think kind of led to Blume, who is much more I guess
understated,
low-key, balanced, technical. By the way, he is now the only CEO of a global leading automaker group that has a degree from China's Tongji University, a doctor's degree. So there's a bit of information.
The one thing I will say is that disruption, because I think you and I agree that there are some structural and foundational issues and challenges with Volkswagen Group. And the only way you're going to make major changes to structure is disrupting, making people uncomfortable. So the whole point of Diess poking and prodding is to really get people and the organizations to change. So I don't know how Blume is going to do that without pissing a bunch of people off, right? Eventually. But if he does that, he's probably doing his job. So there's this irony that you and I agree that Diess was making changes. He failed at the software thing. And I just feel he underestimated the challenge that posed. But
I also wanted to say on a personal side of it, as not as a CEO, well, maybe as a CEO, but also as a person-to-person interaction wise, I've had the privilege of speaking either directly or indirectly or being the presence of both Diess and Wallenstein many times in the past few years before the pandemic in China and elsewhere in the world when they've had events that I attended. And both of these guys, to me, they're very approachable. They're very open. They're very fair. They're patient with you. Like after events, Wallenstein will be there, talking to the media, either planned or unplanned, and he's there. Is very patient. So there's no, for that, I feel like it's a kind of, what's the word I'm trying to look for? A little regret that they're gone. But and there are two of the most, one, vocal, and two, open on what and how they understand. Like they understand the issues, they understand the problems, and they openly talk about it. But I guess at the end of the day, it's time for them to move on. So, the word is pity. It's a pity that they couldn't, continue further. But I guess like what Sebastian Vettel said in his retirement message. He said, I wanted to go with the times, right, and not look to the past. I think that's the same for Volkswagen.
Yeah,
and,
they have some rough waters ahead of them if they're going to make these necessary structural changes that Diess had kind of initially put in place, so because the people need to get fired for any more software snafus, right? Like team wise and organization wide, because they can't delay that any further, right?
Yeah. So going forward, I think the questions that'll come up is what's going to happen to CARIAD? Okay. What's going to happen to China? And once Diess is gone, what is that narrative of Volkswagen surpassing Tesla by 2025? Are we going to hear any more of that or no? So lots of questions, and specifically on China, they're leaving at a point where China is really, their sales are June seem to be better, but over the past few years, they've been down.
Yes.
ICEs or Well, EVs are okay.
Significantly down.
ICEs significantly down, and we just heard Carlos Tavares say today the reason why Jeep couldn't continue was because of some political influence. I think it's plausible. It's part of the reason, but I don't believe it's the majority. I don't believe it's the main reason for Jeep making that decision.
Well, Tavares is scapegoating a little bit, right?
Yeah, and it's the products, it's competition. There's a bit of, I think there is a bit of nationalism. I don't doubt that, but right.
And this is why Tesla needs to watch its back, because we see the challenges that Volkswagen have when relying on China as such a huge part of their profits, right?
Yeah, and now I think Ralph Brandstetter is taking over next Monday or Tuesday, officially August 1st, taking over China operations. That's a hot potato, right? I wouldn't want to be in his position. and Wallenstein is kind of leaving. I don't know. I don't want to say it's on a high, but they just unveiled this Vimo.
He looks like so relieved in these pictures, right?
Yeah, but Vimo is a classic example. I guess they're trying to portray it is that Volkswagen Group employees, I think it was a team of 5 or 6 people that did this project, and 3 of them were females within how many months? I don't know.
Yeah.
But, I mean, Ralph is kind of an outsider to China, though he is a Volkswagen executive, but Wallenstein is somebody who's been in China for years, and now you have an expat.
It is. That's such a head scratcher.
Yeah.
I don't
know.
doubt any of these people's capabilities, but is it the right decision to send an outsider who's not spent? Because this is where I really normally don't mind bringing outsiders in, but in this case, the Chinese market is so dynamic. It moves so fast that unless you're here feeling it, dealing with it, working with it, it's really hard to kind of look at it externally and appreciate the complexity and the speed at which things happen here. So
yeah, so it's basically I think for Volkswagen Group, it's been a global makeover in a matter of weeks and months.
Yes.
Right? North America, they have this new change, this new Scout brand. I don't know what's going to happen there. All announced before Diess, right? The changeover in China, Diess is gone. New structures. Now you have the CFO as a additional role of COO, and Blume having this group CEO role plus a Porsche CEO role. I probably would expect additional announcements, executive announcements.
I think that here in China, they're trying to find a seat. It's like what's that called? Musical chairs, where chairs are getting moved out. And, I don't know if Diess and Blume were actual allies within the company, right? If they're not, then Blume's going to want his own guys in these roles, right? So, yeah, is Brandstetter one of Blume's guys? I don't know, right? So maybe some of these people really understand that they're walking on thin ice.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing is we've seen all the major automakers report second quarter earnings, and again, the numbers are really good, right? Even for Volkswagen, right? You saw the numbers out today, right? And Diess didn't even make a comment in that press release. Right. It's the CFO, but still. Here's a line from I copied from the press release. The group continued to prioritize investment in future PEV technology and software. R&D expenditure increased to euro 4.9 billion in Q2, accelerating Volkswagen's progress towards becoming a software-driven mobility provider. Right there, right? That's what Diess wanted to do. That was the strategic direction.
Yeah, I think Ralph has probably the second hardest job at Volkswagen Group behind Blume.
Oh, definitely. I agree.
But yeah, so let's end the news early. I have a brief list of updates really quickly. NIO is going to be building a phone one a year. They're going to launch once a year.
Yeah.
I got a quick DM this morning from a mole of mine in Australia. BYD is hiring like crazy. They've finally gotten their import approval.
Done. Yep.
And they will be delivering vehicles within the next 60 days to customers in Australia, it looks like. So
I think that was the plan anyways, right? It was to start in August.
Yeah. I think it got delayed a little bit.
Yeah.
And so Australia also approved
New Zealand,
some EV
right?
credits. Yep. Mm-hmm. So I think BYD is going to have another opportunity to grow sales outside of China, because right now, currently, Australia, the leading seller of EVs in Australia is Tesla.
And here's a point I want to make is the recent debate on BYD dethroning Tesla in global EV sales, right, with an asterisk. Tesla is global right now, but BYD is about to become a lot more global within the next 12 months. Okay.
This is where BYD needs to really be careful about their product portfolio and which cars they export to what markets. They need to really study what's going to resonate. They can't just send 10 part numbers to each country or each region. I think they really need to focus on one or two products, right?
And we had seen the announcement that they will be exhibiting at the Paris Motor Show in October.
This is their coming out party.
They will have a range of EVs for the European market. And come CES next January, they'll be making another huge announcement. I'm sure of that.
And as an indication of the quality levels, and Mark will talk to this as well, overall, in 10 years ago, I would have been concerned if China EV Inc. or ICE Inc. tried to export to the US or Europe because quality reliability wasn't there 10 years ago. It is now. Mm-hmm. Every car that we got into the last week and a half, you would see the equivalent kind of quality issues as you would in a European, a Renault or a Buick. So if they're counting on quality and reliability not being there, I think foreign automakers in their home markets are going to be very concerned. So,
yeah.
The last thing I wanted to, two more things. Lenovo is starting to build software now for EVs and AVs, which is now everybody's in the pool. Lei, I can't think of any other Chinese technology company that's not in the game, right?
The BATHL.
Oh, yeah, I know. And finally, XPeng, there was some concern about XPeng lowering price on their vehicles.
I just thought that the irony of that news or chatter is it goes against the way that it's happening, that you can get this discounts at the offline stores. It goes against the business model in the first place, because that's the old traditional legacy style of doing business.
Right.
But in the smart EV age, you don't, right? It shouldn't happen. So it's going backward.
Well,
so I don't know what's going on for XPeng, but
that G9 needs to hit. That G9 needs to hit.
Yeah. Especially, you talk about L9, but yeah, exactly.
The one thing that I will specify between an XPeng direct-to-consumer retail experience versus a NIO is that NIO, I believe, and you correct me if I'm wrong, owns all of their retail locations. They run it themselves. Where XPeng, I believe, also has partners that sell.
Yeah. They have two different, I guess, arrangements. Some of them they own, and some they have partners.
So maintaining brand positioning and because these dealer partners, they own these cars from XPeng. So if they are on the books for a long time, these dealers, what they want to do is they want to discount them to get them out of the car, off the balance sheet. So there's always going to be pressure when there's this divergent strategy for sales. And I don't know if that's kind of sort of what's happening, but XPeng, it's unfortunate because they have 3 cars that are, and we say this, but like over a year old in the market. And that's just too old, I think, right?
Yeah.
So,
like we said, a few episodes ago, the word I use is relentless. It just continues. It's on and on. You can't stop, right?
Yeah. So
that's the dynamic, and that's why some of the legacies are falling behind. And
So I've pulled Mark up and gave him speaking capabilities. So, hey, Mark, what's going on? It's good catching up and seeing you this week.
Yeah, it's been a crazy 2 weeks, right?
Yeah. So can you introduce yourself to everybody and kind of talk about what you're doing in Beijing?
Yeah, sure. So I'm only in Beijing for 2 weeks. I'm actually normally based in Xi'an. I'm essentially, I have a YouTube channel, so I'm making video reviews of Chinese vehicles, so not just cars, but also, as we're going to talk about, things like motorbikes and even trucks as well, and autonomous cars as well. I also do communications consulting, so my background is all in communications. So I do some communications consulting for some of the Chinese startups who are currently spreading out into Europe.
Nice.
And you're you're a Mercedes reject too, right? For 8 years, right?
No. Mercedes are a Mark Rainford reject. No, yeah, I worked there for 8 years. So I was there in the UK, Germany, and in China. So I was in Beijing for 3.5 years before. So yeah, I've been around the automotive space. I've got a master's degree in automotive journalism. So I'm trying to put that to good use, basically.
And it's a great time to do it.
Great time to be doing it. I mean, things have changed, as you mentioned before. Things have changed so much in 10 years in the Chinese EV space. The development is incredible, and it's kind of hard to comprehend unless you kind of witnessing it. But obviously, it's starting to reach out to Europe now as well.
Well, I say the changes are measured by weeks and days, not by years.
That's true, yeah. Very good stuff.
So, Mark, what was the first car that you had, and how did you go about getting these things and stuff?
Sure, yeah. So the first car I had this week, last week actually, was the Polestar 2. So I have contacted Geely. Ash, I don't know if he's on the call or if he listens, but Ash, who's quite prominent on Twitter, he's one of the Geely communications people. It's a lot easier to get press cars in the bigger cities like Beijing than it is in Xi'an. So I asked him, while I'm here, is there anything I can get hold of? So he supported me with a Polestar 2 and also a Zeekr 001. So we had 2 days in the Polestar 2 on Wednesday and Thursday last week. Obviously, it's not technically a Chinese car per se, but it is made here. And obviously, Geely being the parent company, well, not the parent company, but highly involved. The Polestar was amazing. For me, in terms of all the EVs that I've driven, there is no other car that is as engaging as the Polestar 2 to drive. It's a full hands-on experience. All the throttle feel, the brake feel, the steering feel is light years ahead of anything else that we have here. And I've discussed this with you, in that the Chinese automotive market doesn't really want a car that is as hands-on as the Polestar 2, because when you've driven it for a day, you know you've driven it for a day. Whereas, most Chinese cars are geared up to have much lighter steering, a much more comfortable ride, I would say. So it was amazing for someone like me coming from Europe who loves to have a car and wants an electric car to feel like, I'm part of the experience. But maybe it's less so for the Chinese market. But it does look amazing.
Let me ask both of you this question. So you've tested the Polestar 2, the Auto L9, Zeekr 001, XPeng P7. If you're living in China, let's say put your consumer hat on. If you were in the market for a car, which one of those will be on top of the list? And the other question is, how would you rank these cars as industry experts, as testers, as KOLs?
So I would say hands down, the L9 I was really impressed. Unfortunately, our contact at Li Auto, who was amazing, Tim, thanks if you're listening. I think because of that whole spring, issue last
Gate?
week. Yes,
Yeah.
Spring Gate. We weren't allowed to have the car by ourselves for the whole day. And so we went to Li Auto and had a big meeting in a conference room, and he kind of went over the slides with us and learned a lot that way. But then we walked outside of the facility, and there's a green L9, and exterior wise, it's a bit generic, but it's not ugly. It's good looking car, but it's not like super distinctive in my opinion. But then we get in the car, and I'm like, fit and finish of the materials was really, really well done, and the screens were super cool. The lack of an instrument panel didn't look out of place, right? And so we drove it around, and there's a area in Shunyi where they test like autonomous vehicles, and so there had these cardboard boxes that look like cars. And there's this Meituan delivery robot that was test riding up and down. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And there was a guy on a scooter, a Meituan employee on a scooter, just following it. Right. And so we parked here, and there's no other cars. And then Tim just gave us a rundown of all of the cool features. And I sat in the back, I sat in the front. That head-up display, I thought it was going to be a little bit weird. But the head-up display, it's like 13 inches wide, and it looks great. It was super clear, and the software capabilities, it wasn't buggy. The 8155 is super fast, Snapdragon, the Qualcomm, but
wait till the G do, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Nice. But and then we drove it, and it's a big car, it's a heavy car, but it drove. We had we had the Li One for a while, for like a week, and they made a lot of improvement over the Li One, and the balance of the vehicle was great because we got to drive it around with Tim in the car, so we couldn't trash it too much. But I was like, wow. And I misquoted the pricing last week. I think I said 400. I think it's 459. So it's close to 70 grand. So
it's a flagship right now.
Yeah, it's not the cheapest thing in the world, but man, dude, it is going to take a ton of sales from BMW, from Mercedes, and you're going to see a lot of people deciding between the ES7, at least in China, the ES7 and the L9 in the next 18 months, probably. So, Mark, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so it depends on your customer base, but I think I agree with you. I was nodding along with you when you said the L9. It was so impressive from the get-go, and I think Tim said to us that it comes in at less than a GLC 300, yet it's the size of a GLS, and actually with more space inside. For me, it was 3 genuinely adult-sized rows. So I've never sat in a car that has a third row that you can actually comfortably fit an adult in, and everything worked. It was so impressive. The gesture control, even at this early stage, worked totally fine. The screens were super slick.
Even with your terrible Mandarin, it understood you. So
that's it. I mean, most systems seem to have a problem even from the very beginning. Just getting them to understand the first thing that you say, but it works for everything. No, I was genuinely impressed by it. It would have been nice to take it for a drive and check out the air suspension and things. But interior-wise, it was a brilliant car. It looks really cool. It looks like kind of a grown-up version of the Li One.
That burnt orange was actually nice color. I like that color.
Really nice. But yeah, I think, like you said, it will take so many sales from the German brands, and even to be honest, I'd be surprised if the ES7 can keep up with it, because I doubt the ES7 comes with all of the family-oriented features. That was the thing that Tim said to us very clearly. He said, "We are a family company. We don't build sports cars. We are a family-oriented company," and they know exactly who they're targeting. They know exactly what they want, because there's all the feedback from Also Home, the giant basically the car forum that is founded by the owner of Li Auto. They've taken all that feedback and they've made an absolutely brilliant car. It was genuinely really impressive. It will probably easily double their sales, I think, to 20,000, if not more.
And Tim said family about 100 times. everything was family.
Yeah,
And
that's their positioning. Yeah.
he also said that Li Xiang is a tall guy. He's probably, 6'1", 6'2", maybe like your size, Lei. And he said,
no, he's not that tall.
Wow.
I'm 6'2". He's I look down on him.
Oh,
so.
okay. So anyways,
he's not short. So
Tim's not super tall, but anyways, he said that Li Xiang was kind of the person that they measured the back seat on. So that's why they have like a full size third row for big people to sit. And so, yeah, man.
Yeah. Bit of history, Li Xiang before Prior was known as 车和家, which meant car and home. That was their name when they started the company. So you can get why it's all about family. Tell us, what were some of the problems or issues you encountered with any of these cars?
Oh, so we tried out the Zeekr and and we picked up your friend. We picked up our friend Nori, who's
Nori Hiso or something.
Shirozu.
Yeah.
If you guys don't know who Nori is, just Google him. He writes for Reuters. He's a legendary automotive journalist.
Yeah.
Like legendary.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he doesn't have a driver's license in China, so we just picked him up because I thought he would like to see the Zeekr, and he did. And we're driving it, and this thing is a monster. It like 0 to 60 in like 3.5 seconds. It is a monster. It is 2 meters wide, but we did need that 8155 upgrade because that infotainment and the mapping was pretty buggy. And I'll have Mark talk to it a little bit, but the car is great. It's in my opinion, it's a great first try. There's a lot to build on, but like the Li 1 to the L9, hopefully we see a bit more refinement in version 2 of the 001. I think it's a great tour. It's it's super roomy. The interior it has some little, because it's 400,000 RMB, I believe. And so, people stare at it when we drive by for sure. But there are some improvements that could be made. And the funny thing is, so Nori's in the front seat, I'm in the back seat. I just wanted to check it out. And then he's like, oh, we should call Ash. And so he picks up his iPhone. And so he tries to FaceTime Ash while we're driving. Ash didn't pick up, but thought that was pretty funny. So, Mark, did you want to add anything?
Yeah. So, I mean, like you said, the system was the main issue, wasn't it? We, for example, one time we left the car park, we put the sat nav on, and the sat nav was giving us the correct instructions, and the heads-up display, which is pretty big, about 14 inches, was really, really good. But the map was still showing that we were still in the car park, even though we traveled, from way outside of Beijing back into the center. The clock was wrong by about 6 hours. There were just a few things.
European time.
Were really slow. The system definitely had some issues, but I do know that they've rolled out, I think, a version 3 of their software this week, which is apparently supposed to solve everything. And of course, they're rolling out the 8155 Snapdragon processor as well. So I think they're fairly confident that will sort the issues out, but we'll have to try it again once we can get hold of one with the updated stuff. But as a car, I really enjoyed it. Like Tu said, it looked amazing. Looks great in any location. For me, it kind of had two personalities because I was thinking of it first as a sports car, and I was kind of hoping for something a bit like the Polestar, but bigger. It certainly doesn't have any of the same steering feel and throttle feel as the Polestar, but it does have the speed. It has incredible pickup. Even for a big vehicle, it had really, really strong handling. So I took it to the twisty roads outside of Beijing, and it didn't struggle at all. It was like a quattro in terms of stability. But then I realised that actually, if you turn all the settings down to comfort, it makes a great GT. It would make a great sort of cross-continental cruiser. Obviously, not with quite the same mileage as your standard cruisers, but it was a big car, loads of space, very comfortable, panoramic roof, all the features that you want for a GT cruiser. And maybe that's the way that they should look at marketing it. It's got the power when you need it, but actually, it's better for the long distances.
Yeah, I thought I was pretty comfortable in the car. I think the seats were pretty supportive, and the ride was pretty firm, but not like bone jarring firm. So
when you guys drove the L9, did you notice any difference it being an EREV versus the other BEVs, was there any noticeable difference in way it, like, did you feel anything, or did it feel like a BEV?
I'd say that and this might be how it's tuned, so don't quote me on this, but it just wasn't as quick as some of the other cars that we drove last week or this week.
It is a big car, so with an engine, with batteries,
and again, we had maybe 15 minutes each behind the wheel, so it wasn't like a thorough assessment because we were basically driving it around one street, right? But again, it was abandoned, so we got to mash on the accelerator. It's pretty quick, but I can't. But Mark has been in EVs the last 2 weeks straight, so maybe he can give more color on that.
Yeah, no, I'd echo what you said. Really, I mean, I think they had the engine turned on permanently, but you didn't notice it. It wasn't loud. It wasn't intrusive. It didn't feel any less refined than a normal EV. And as we said before, they're a family-oriented company. They don't even give out a 0 to 100 time for the L9 specifically because they're not interested in cars that are going to be lightning quick off the line, which is what you'll get with the Polestar and the Zeekr. And even the XPeng can do it in a pretty quick time. But we 9 are not chasing those numbers. It's not what the target audience is about. I thought it was super refined, especially for a pre-production model, really well put together. There was only maybe the boot lid wasn't entirely straight, but I think everything else was pretty good.
And we identified maybe a handful of issues for the pre-production model that we told Tim about, just kind of walking around looking at things. But if they can make 10, 15,000, 20,000 of those a month, like how they made this pre-production model, the quality and reliability is going to be fine. And one thing I will also say is the Li 1, when you're driving it, it has a bit of a whine, like a small whine. That's gone in the L9 because I'd asked him about it, and he told me that they knew about that with the Li 1, and they kind of remedied it with the L9. So hey, so let's move on to Evoke. So I've driven the Polestar, and I'd kind of been to Evoke. But Mark, what were your thoughts on the urban classic?
Yeah, I thought it was quite good. I mean, I think if you're looking for something that is kind of looks as refined and put together as your standard bikes, your Kawasaki's and your Hondas, they're not quite there yet. I think that's probably what they'll start to work on next. But in terms of performance, it was pretty strong. I was kind of worried that it was going to be lightning quick, to be honest, like really, really quick, like throw yourself over the back wheel quick. I thought it was more progressive than that. So I go on.
And so let me give a little bit of background. I should have given back. Evoke Motorcycles is a electric motorcycle, and we're not talking mopeds. We're talking proper monster Ducati monster style motorcycle, and they're based. They have a factory that they partnered with Foxconn in South Beijing. And it's funny because it's started by a Canadian guy and a German-Polish guy. Super great dudes that I want to see succeed. And they invited us down, checked out the factory, some of their prototypes, how they make batteries, and how they test the batteries, and then gave us the keys to a couple of urban classics, and we drove around Yizhuang, and it was a ton of fun. I was a little nervous because I hadn't ridden a motorcycle in years, and like Mark said, it wasn't lightning quick. Mark, you even tried to pop a couple wheelies, right, and couldn't do it?
Yeah, I did try. Basically, started going full throttle from standstill, and there was no risk of it lifting up on the front wheel. So that's down to my weight, or not bad, I don't think so. Sebastian suggested that which is, I think they've got a 2022 model, it might be a little bit quicker. That might be closer to getting the lift up. The thing is, the battery pack is 70 kilograms, I think he said. So
yeah,
he said it's on the heavy side for a 250 motorbike, but all the weight is kept quite low down. The battery stack is right down there at the front, so the chances of getting a wheelie are not too high, I don't think. But yeah, it was never at risk of it. As I said, it was really progressive. You could control it no problem once you kind of got the wiggle into your hips, let's say. The handling was quite decent as well. Just feel heavy to begin with, as will the 6061 when that comes out, which is more of a kind of a tourer bike that does long distances. But no, I mean, think he said he drives it daily to work and he can get to the office in 20 minutes or something.
Yeah, splitting lanes.
Yeah. So it's an ideal vehicle, I think, for being in the city. You can come home late at night, not wake all your neighbours up with the noise of the exhaust. And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for a bike that people can use every day. I think the Urban does that pretty well.
And it should be noted that if you've ridden a petrol motorcycle and changing gears and all that stuff, it's completely different feel. It's super quick. It's quick enough, and they could make it quicker, but they decided not to. I think they're going to explore some different features with some of their other products. But yeah, they're currently shipping to Australia, to the US, to parts of Europe. I'm not sure which countries in Europe, to be honest with you. So go ahead, Lei.
No, I was just going to ask you, what did their assessment and you guys' assessment of the business case? You just talk about, like, there's no, I'm not aware of any other company like Evoke in China, correct?
Yeah. There's one or two that Mark had reached out to, right? Like Da Vinci, right, Mark?
Yeah. There's a couple of. I think there's one called CSC or CCS. I think they're also selling bikes abroad, at least in the US that I know of. I don't know how much bigger they are. And then there is Da Vinci, but Da Vinci haven't shipped a bike yet. They've got a pretty exciting looking bike, DC100, which apparently has the ability to balance by itself as well. So it doesn't have to have a stand, and you can make it follow you as you're walking. They haven't shipped any yet. I've tried to get a test drive of one. They said that they don't have any bikes ready for that yet. So whether that one will come to fruition or not is another question. We'll have to see.
So it's mainly for export, is that correct? Because I don't see there's a market in China.
Yeah, they don't sell it. I don't think, in China. So
right, because regulatory wise or market wise, it's so niche.
It's about $9,800 for the Urban Classic, and
okay.
They're just getting started. They're raising capital right now. So if anybody is interested in learning more about Evoke,
yeah, because they've been around for quite a few years now.
Yeah, you'd met Nathan before, you said, right?
Yeah, like 14, 15-ish. I think that's when I met him.
So they're pretty passionate about what they do, and they're just grinding it out right now. I think there's a huge opportunity for electric motorcycles in the next 3, 4, 5 years. So hopefully they raise enough capital to pave that runway. So the next car we should move on to is the XPeng P7, and I had visited.
Does it feel old now?
Well, that's the thing, right? So I had visited XPeng, right, in 2020, right before COVID, and there were some P7 mules there that I got into.
Yeah.
And it has really improved from the first iteration to now, where the dashboard and the front console actually looks pretty good. It doesn't look like you bolted on an iPad onto an instrument panel, right? So I've driven them before, so I'll let Mark kind of give his assessment, because you have to remember that it's a more of a mass market, aggressively priced mid-size sedan, right? So when comparing to some of these other cars that are a bit more premium, it's not going to stand up to that, right? So go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, so that was definitely the first thing. In terms of material quality, there's a few cheap plastics in there on the dashboard that I wasn't expecting, to be honest, because most people talk about XPeng in the same breath as Neo, but they're not the same price-wise and certainly not the same quality-wise in terms of interior. But in terms of the car, I mean, for what you're getting, I think you get quite a decent car. I mean, it was really well planted. Again, I took it to the twisties to see what it was like. It was really well planted. Again, progressive acceleration and things like that.
And Mark, even though it's the price lower than a Neo, they could still keep the price the same in the range, but they could still do better with some of the materials, right? Some of that plastic stuff. They could do better.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, that for me was probably the biggest disappointment. But other than that, it works out in every way. So XPeng do a lot of their own software. The screen was really quick. It was clear. They have a lot of features, of course, like the X-Pilot and things like that. I wanted to try the X-Pilot, but unfortunately my Chinese isn't good enough, because in order to activate it, you need to watch a video and then do a little test first and answer some questions.
Yeah, there's a testing mode.
Oh, Li Auto is doing that too. Li Auto is doing that too now.
Yeah, that's something worth doing because I mean, I know Li Auto are keen. Li Auto won't use the word autonomous, and they will not give you a level for the autonomous of their car because they're sick of seeing videos of Tesla drivers with sun shields in their window, laid back on the front seat. That's not what they want. So it's kind of part of the education piece, and XPeng do the same thing in terms of their videos. But I mean, yeah, as a car, I mean, it felt it was quick enough. The one that we had was a rear-wheel drive car. Comes with about 267 horsepower, something like that, which is more than enough.
That's a lot.
Plenty quick.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it was plenty quick, not too heavy. One of the things that I noticed about it was it definitely feels a lot smaller. So it feels easier to place on country roads and also in the city. I mean, the Zeekr was an absolute beast. That was huge. But the XPeng is much easier to place on the road. It looks great, obviously. No, there's a couple of quirks. I mean, it was quite loud on the motorway as well. So there was quite a bit of drone in the motors when you got above 55 kilometers per hour. It would kind of do a kind of a humming noise. So it doesn't have any double glazing on the front or the rear, not like things like the Ito M5. I think the Zeekr might also have double glazing. So yeah, it was just a bit rough around the edges. And I think it's probably something that they're working on, obviously, because if you look at how companies like Neta have improved from their first car, the V, up to the U, that was a massive step. And then the S is going to come out, and that looks like it's going to be a step again. I think XPeng are also trying to move in that direction, just generally improve, material quality, build quality, things like that.
And that's the one thing that was plainly obvious when comparing the Polestar, the Zeekr, and the L9 is there's just not enough sound deadener in the P7 when compared to those cars. And so we didn't have to yell when we were talking, but we had to speak loudly. Let's just say that. So there could be some, and I'm saying the glass is probably a little bit thinner, the lack of sound deadener in the doors and parts of the frame that made the road noise a little bit, and maybe even the tires, right? Maybe there's a cheaper set of tires that kind of made road noise, and it's not unacceptable. Let me be clear, the road noise, but it was like noticeably louder than I remember the L9 being, right? So the last thing that, and this was kind of a cool thing, actually, two things. So for the Polestar, we brought in Anders, right? And so there's going to be a video of the charging stuff that we talked about last time. And then the last thing that we did yesterday was head into e-tron again and visit the Baidu Apollo depot. Unfortunately, it rained like crazy on Wednesday. And I think that was the reason the city, the local Xiaoqu, said that there couldn't be any robotaxi rides on Thursday. So we were scheduled to go and ride in some robotaxis from Apollo, but all we got to do, which was still cool as hell, was check out the RT6. They recently unveiled L4 robotaxi that Baidu will be manufacturing in 2023 and rolling out as part of their fleet of robotaxis. No steering wheel, 3 seats, and the refinement of this prototype was great. We did not get to sit in it, but we spent probably 20 minutes taking pictures, taking videos, asking a lot of questions, 38 sensors, 8 LiDAR, 12 cameras or something like that. And so this thing, the inside and the seats were kind of awkward, but the car looks great.
Size-wise, it's what, L9? Or a little bit smaller than an L9?
Yeah, it's chabuduo,
okay.
But it's super roomy. It's super roomy, like spacious, right? Especially because there's only 3 seats in it. And I think for 250,000 RMB, man, they've kind of set the bar. We thought Deep Route had set the bar, but actually 250, so $37,000 effectively. You can get a level 4 capable robotaxi from Baidu, and they're going to be launching a lot of them come 2023.
Hey, Mark, curious where you are because the background music. Are you at a coffee place, a bar? Or?
Apologies, I'm at Universal Studios with my friend. I'm having a day off from driving cars today.
Thank you for doing this. That's interesting.
Tell those minions to shut up, dude.
I'm trying to find a quiet space, but there's speakers everywhere.
Because too, when you said about minions, I didn't get you. Like, minions? Now I understand.
So yeah, so overall, I think, and I'd mentioned this in the newsletter. I think if you were here, Lei, you'd get invited quite often too. But I took for granted these invitations, and we shouldn't, right? So
I've never got the chance before the pandemic. While I was there, I've had plenty of chance to check out these cars statically, but I've never had the chance to kind of drive them. I think the only one I've driven was the G3 in 2019 down in Guangzhou.
Oh, and you'd be amazed of the refinement from the G3 till now on every EV, I think.
And for an extended period of time, the only other EV I've driven was the Model 3 here in the US for a week. But it's probably totally different than many of these that you guys have tried.
I'm looking forward to getting with Frank, going to his design studio, signing that NDA, not being able to talk about it, but checking that stuff out, and then driving the Robo One, because that's probably going to be in the next 12 or 18 months the biggest. It's probably going to push the envelope the most when it comes to the software, the UX, and the UI. Because you and I have become pretty good friends with Frank, and so he shares these little tidbits that are very helpful to us. But Mark, I should add that Inside China Auto and Sino Auto Insights will have some videos that we'll be posting on YouTube that I think will be cool to watch. And I want to emphasize how we, as in me, you, and Mark, we look at cars a little bit differently than I think just these regular KOLs, right? Because we're in the industry. And so we know, I think, what to look for when it comes to quality, reliability, the sounds that cars make or shouldn't make. And so I think having that perspective is going to be different than some of these other videos where it's just KOLs talking about how great everything is on every car that they review. We try to be very objective, right? So
I guess the conclusion is that these are all well done, nice features, well ahead of the foreign legacies in some of the features, but there's improvement to be made, right? I think that's the...
And you can bet that there will be improvement, because in just the 2 or 3 years that we originally saw the first editions of all these either early products to new products, the leaps that they've taken have just been amazing. So they're learning and they're getting customer feedback and they're incorporating it into their new products and software.
Yeah, the way they do this is posting on Weibo and adding the other executive say, hey, you got to look into this and get to it.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the XPeng DMS with the small eyes that went viral on social media.
As an Asian person, I don't know, I kind of laugh, but I'm like, dude, whatever, man. I don't know how to feel about that, because I have the double eyelids, so I don't have that issue. But Mark, did you have any final comments on, overall, not just one particular vehicle, but kind of your thoughts on the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, it's been useful for me because it's obviously a bit harder to get cars in Xi'an than it is in Beijing, but to actually see the different identities that are coming out of the cars in China. I mean, if you look at how far the market's come in the last 10 years, it's kind of insane, really. The quality of cars that they're able to produce now. They were all really well stuck together. Handling-wise, they were good. Obviously, the Polestar's a bit different because it's a bit more Europe-oriented, so it drives, in my opinion, far superior to the other ones. But yeah, it's, another thing I would add quickly about the XPeng as well, which I remembered afterwards. We were trying the adaptive cruise control on it, and it was quite delayed. So what would happen is you'd set it on adaptive cruise control. If a car pulls in front of you, the car would slam on the brakes in order to try and rebuild that gap as quickly as possible again to the vehicle in front, which was a bit of a challenge because then it affects all the people around you. And then when that car eventually moves out the way again, it's really, really slow to get back to the top speed. So it's not really a smooth enough process for me yet. I know I think 42 House did a comparison of all the systems, and they noted that the XPeng was kind of more cautious than the others. And I think sort of making cruise control and autonomous features into a smoother process for everybody, that's going to be where the challenge is going to come. Because at the minute, obviously, human interaction is probably what's holding most things back. If all the computers did it together, it would probably be fine. At the moment, there's still, obviously, the majority of people are driving cars themselves, and the adaptation to that is a challenge for the machine, let's say.
Right on.
Yeah, and notice that we've never talked even once about range. Right, this was our conversation we had with John Walker the other day. Right, that it's history now. That they no longer buy based on range. They buy based on how fast the HMI is, how good your these tech features are. So
and there's just enough diverse product in the market here that you can pretty much find the exact product that you want. You don't have to compromise too many things, I think. That's the main difference between the European and US markets. There's still just a handful of quality EVs out there in those markets. And the other thing, too, is that we talk about a handful of brands here, but there are a lot of choices from Aeon, from Neta, from all these other companies that are actually pretty viable, too. So I'm telling you, I've gotten into dozens of cars, American cars, European cars, SUVs, right? Like this L9, it would sell like crazy in the United States. I don't care what type of engine it is, E-Rev, a BEV. This thing was like, and the key is that the software and the infotainment system wasn't intimidating, because when you press on a lot of the infotainment systems in these new cars, you're like, okay, you got to go 3 or 4 levels deep before you figure out how to. And Velker said this. John Velker said this when we, shameless plug. He's going to be our next Max episode guest. He was like changing the vents on the air conditioner. We had to go three levels down. Man, this Li Auto thing, and remember, this is in Chinese, and so Mark and I are not Lei, right? We can't read Chinese super well. So just being able to see the symbols and kind of like logically think through, okay, let's press this button. So that's where it's, if GM, Ford, Volkswagen can kind of get that, and that has nothing to do with being nationalistic or, a domestic versus a foreign brand. It's just making great design vehicles that have quality and reliability, right?
I think the internal and the external factors nowadays are play a much more role or influence on the market. I do believe that. Whether it's a nationalistic view, whether it's these young Gen Zs, whether it's competition, everything at play, I think, and this changeover to the EVs, that somehow the Chinese brands moved just a few steps faster, and for the foreign companies to catch up, it's been a headache. So what I'm expecting Volkswagen in China in particular to do is first make some sacrifices, make some tough decisions. One example would be Skoda. I think when I talked to Wallenstein, he kind of alluded to it. He said in our Max episode that they were making a decision. They plan to make a decision on that, and I could think that it would be something like a Jeep, that no longer what they're going to do on the electrification side, what they're going to do on the localization side. So at the end of the day, probably Volkswagen and Audi, including Jetta, are going to be the dominant localized brands, plus Porsche and the other brands that are imported. So they have to make one of those decisions.
Well, and you're absolutely right. And that's where, earlier in their conversation, I said they just need to move faster, right? Because it's not a 5-year product life cycle anymore. So
yeah. I also think that Ralph is also looking much more ahead, a few years down the road, because they do have the unveiled entity. They do have the PPE joint venture, right, with Audi, with FAW. So these are all past 2025, right?
Which is a lifetime away in EV years.
So now ID seems, I think ID was actually okay based on the June numbers, but for a while, right? The Mercedes EQCs, the iX3s, all of these, all the e-trons, right? We look at that. We look at that chart that Neil did of different price segments, and the volumes are not there yet.
Yes,
and they're going to continue to have headaches, increasing volumes. So that's the tough part.
This is before the ES7 and the L9 come out. They're having troubles on sales volume. So the one thing that's for sure is that BMW and Mercedes, with their mid-size premium SUVs that are in the EV sector or segment, they're going to have to reduce price. Full stop. Mark that down. They're going to reduce price, especially maybe right before they start delivering the L9s and the ES7s. And Mark, if you're listening, we had conversations because we're stuck in Beijing traffic, just talking about his time at Mercedes and stuff. So maybe you can also comment with the culture at Mercedes while you're working here in China and in Beijing, and because you kind of alluded to how difficult it is to change that culture in the German companies, right? So if you're listening, Mark, feel free to chime in.
Yeah. Certainly in China, things were a lot quicker because, it's just a mentality to move quicker here. But having worked over in Germany as well, I mean, everything is just, it's so much slower. And it's partially down to employment rules, so because it's really difficult to get rid of anybody. But also, as you mentioned loads of times, a lot of electric cars now, 90% of the product is software, and the rest of it is the car. And all these legacy car companies are set up to be car companies, engineering companies. So they had thousands of engineers working on diesel engines and petrol engines who suddenly are unable to work on electric cars because that's not their speciality anymore. And also, I think I would say definitely in Germany, there's a resistance to change more so than in any other place that I've worked. And that permeates, and it takes a really, really long way to a really huge effort, a long time to make that move. And I think that's what Diess has faced at Volkswagen. And he's had to push them too far. And so some people have grated against that. But certainly at Mercedes, making change happen really quickly was a problem. I mean, we had projects that we started because we thought, okay, instead of going to a software company, we'll do it ourselves, all kinds of things. And they would spend billions on these projects. They'd take 5 years. After 5 years, there'd be nothing at the end of it. Then they'd decide, okay, right, let's rename the project and we'll kind of do it again and do another project. And it never happened, So there's kind of a pride in wanting to do things themselves, which I get because I like doing that kind of thing myself, like DIY and stuff. But as a partner, they've got to accept that cars are not necessarily just about being an engineered vehicle anymore. That's only half of the product. The rest of it is software, the user experience, making things work. And it's a slow process. It's coming, but they kind of have to realize it faster because it's trying to adapt super quick to anything. You've seen most of you have seen how much the country's changed in the last 10 years. Speed of change is not a thing that is feared here, but it is feared, especially in Germany and in the legacy automotive.
Great point. I mean, me being away for 2.5 years, I feel already I'm very Tu. You know what I mean? Like, if I were to go back now, I probably would not be used to certain things, even though I've lived in China for like 20 years. Because they change by the days and weeks.
I think the first thing that would amaze you, Lei, is the number of green plates in Beijing and Shanghai, right?
Yeah.
I really think that.
I think there's actually more in Xi'an. I was looking today, and the proportion is even higher in the smaller cities.
Yeah. So, no, going back to Mark's comments, I was going to say that in the Chinese, there's a saying called 以毒攻毒, which means you use poison to cure poison. And I think that's many of the foreign legacy automakers that they have to admit that they have to go through that. Ford is admitting, right? 30,000, was it 3,000 or 30,000 employees? 3,000? Rivian just made a cut employee cut, right?
6%, yep.
6%. So Volkswagen eventually will have to do the same thing.
Volkswagen needs to eliminate brands in China. They can't manage this many brands.
Yeah, I talked about that. So these sacrifices or these that you have to go through or pain that you have to go through. I said, right, no pain, no gain. Or
GM did it, right? They got rid of Oldsmobile. They got rid of Hummer. Well, they're bringing Hummer back, but as an EV brand. So, but yeah, it is concerning. It's an awesome time to be in the EV space globally because I think we're starting to see green shoots for the United States with the Senate bill with the chips and all this stuff.
Yeah, the CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act with those new tax credit rules.
And our man Taylor, and Jack, they're the BYD guys, and so I think it's going to be a lot of smiles from the Snowball team come next year when BYD just freaking blitzes the entire world with all of their products, right? So, man, 300,000 units a month starting in August, Lei. We're going to see even more BYDs, especially in Oz, come the end of this year, beginning of next. So I see them quickly becoming the number one EV brand in Australia, maybe by Q1, Q2 of 2023.
Yeah.
So
hopefully the shutdown for a week, was it, at the Shenzhen campus? Hopefully that was just a blip. And so far, Beijing, Shanghai has been okay. There's been outbreaks in other parts of China. But, this is going to continue for a while, I think. But hopefully that won't affect the outlook, which I said was 6 million plus.
It was cool seeing the RT6 because Mark had tweeted we were the first English-speaking media. I don't really consider myself media, but we were the first English-speaking media to see the RT6 live. So that was cool. And
well, we talk about it on CEM, so in a way, yes.
Yeah. So the one thing that is actually creating some heat here in China is the Lotus, the Electre. I think they're really trying to build some momentum with that. So the irony is Geely is a major contributor to both brands, and it almost seems like they're going to compete against each other, the Polestar 3 and the Lotus Electre. And pricing wise, the Electre is going to be a bit more premium price, but they're both going to be built in China. Polestar 3 is also going to be built in South Carolina. So brands having fights within the family, that's going to be pretty interesting to watch as well, right? So,
and next week we'll talk about July EV sales.
Yeah, and then again, a reminder, Mark, when you're done hanging out with your Minion friends, get those videos up and check out Inside China Auto YouTube website. And then also we have John Velker's Max episode that will be up probably end of next week. So had a great time talking to him, super knowledgeable.
And then another housekeeping. So the next guest we'll have, well, at least one of the next guests we'll have will be someone on batteries again, or upstream raw materials on batteries. So
I'm looking forward to that because he knows a ton anyways.
Yeah.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lei, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.